You can walk into the right room and lose 5 years of decision quality without noticing it. Not because anyone manipulated you, not because someone told you what to think, because your brain quietly adjusted to the emotional baseline of the people around you. Spend enough time in an anxious environment and opportunities start looking risky. Spend enough time around cynicism and curiosity slowly turns into skepticism. The strange part is that this rarely feels like influence. Your decisions still feel rational, your judgments still feel like your own thinking, but underneath that confidence, something else may already be happening. Your brain is constantly simulating the emotional states of the people around you, copying small signals from tone, posture, micro-expressions, and adjusting your internal state before your thoughts even begin. Which means by the time you start reasoning about a situation, the emotional baseline of your brain may already have shifted. And once that baseline moves, the same facts start producing very different decisions. So in this video, we'll look at 3 subtle signs that an emotional environment is shaping your judgment, and 1 adjustment that protects your decision quality. Think about the last time you entered a room where something felt off. No one needed to explain it. No one had to say a word, but within seconds, you could feel it. The tension in the air, the silence between people, the slightly forced tone in someone's voice. Your body notices these things almost immediately. Maybe your shoulders tighten without you realizing it. Maybe you become quieter than usual. Maybe you suddenly feel more cautious about what you say. What's strange is that nothing directly happened to you. You simply walked into the environment. The same thing happens in more subtle ways every day. Spend a few minutes with someone who is excited, and your energy begins to rise. Sit near someone who is constantly stressed, and your own mind can slowly become more tense. We usually explain this by saying someone set the mood. But if you pay attention, the change happens faster than that explanation would suggest, often within seconds. And the strange part is that it rarely feels like imitation. It feels like something inside you naturally shifted on its own, as if your brain quietly decided that this new emotional state simply made sense here. But that raises a strange question. If the emotion feels like yours, why does it so often begin somewhere else? Most emotional influence doesn't look like influence. There is no obvious moment where you decide to copy someone's mood. No clear signal that says, this emotion came from somewhere else. Instead, it arrives quietly. You sit with someone who is worried about something. They talk normally, nothing dramatic, but after a while you notice your own mind starting to scan for problems. Small uncertainties suddenly feel heavier than they did before. Not because the situation changed, because the emotional tone changed. What makes this difficult to notice is that the emotion quickly feels authentic. It doesn't feel like imitation. It feels like your own interpretation of reality. Your brain begins generating thoughts that match the new state. Concerns feel more logical. Optimism feels less convincing. Neutral situations start looking slightly more negative. And once that happens, the emotional shift becomes self-reinforcing. The mind doesn't just feel the emotion, it starts building a story around it. A tense room makes problems look bigger. An enthusiastic group makes ideas feel more exciting. A cynical environment slowly turns curiosity into skepticism. At that point, the emotion no longer feels borrowed at all. It feels like you simply arrived at the same conclusion as everyone else. But something unusual is happening underneath this process, because in many cases, your brain changes its state before it changes its thoughts. And that small reversal begins to affect something much bigger, your decisions. When emotions shift, decisions often follow quietly behind. You may not notice it immediately. The change is usually subtle at first. A slightly shorter response in a conversation, a little less patience with a problem, a quicker judgment about someone's intention. The reasoning in your mind still feels normal. You still believe you're simply reacting to the situation in front of you. But something in the background has already changed. Psychologists sometimes notice this pattern in groups. Place several people in an environment where tension slowly builds. Maybe uncertainty about work, a stressful deadline, or someone influential who is constantly irritated. At first, everyone believes they are thinking independently. But after a while, conversations become sharper, decisions become more defensive, small disagreements escalate faster than they normally would, not because the facts changed, because the emotional baseline of the group shifted. Once that baseline moves, the brain begins interpreting the same information differently. Neutral comments can sound critical. Minor risks start to look dangerous. Opportunities feel less trustworthy. What's strange is that most people never experience this as emotional influence. They experience it as good judgment. And that is where the pattern becomes harder to see, because by the time emotions begin shaping decisions, the brain has already started convincing itself that those decisions were rational all along. But there is a deeper layer underneath this process, something the brain is doing automatically, long before reasoning even begins. It's not just observing emotions in other people. In a quiet way, it is recreating them internally. Most people imagine emotions spreading through conversation. Someone complains, someone argues, someone celebrates. Words travel through the room, and slowly the emotional tone changes. But a large part of emotional contagion happens before anyone finishes a sentence. The brain is constantly reading tiny signals from the people around us. A shift in someone's voice, a micro-expression on their face, the tension in their posture, even the rhythm of their breathing. These signals arrive faster than conscious thought, and the brain does something unusual with them. Instead of simply observing them, it begins to reproduce fragments of the same state internally. A tense voice can cause subtle muscle activation in your own body. A relaxed posture nearby can slow your breathing without you noticing. A nervous laugh can make your own chest tighten slightly. None of this requires intention. It happens automatically. The brain is constantly running quiet simulations of the people around you, trying to predict what they might feel or do next. Most of the time, this process is useful. It helps humans coordinate, empathize, and understand each other quickly. But it also means something unexpected. Your emotional state is not built in isolation. It is constantly being adjusted by the signals of the people around you. And once enough of those signals accumulate, the environment stops being just a background. It becomes something closer to an emotional current, one that slowly pulls everyone in the same direction. But the consequences of that current don't stop at mood. Over time, it can start changing behavior in ways that are much harder to notice and much harder to reverse, because emotional environments don't just influence moments. They influence patterns. At first, emotional contagion looks temporary. You spend time around someone stressed, and you feel a little more tense. You leave the situation, and your mood returns to normal. It seems like a short-lived effect. But emotional environments rarely operate only in single moments. They operate through repetition. The same tone of conversations, the same reactions to problems, the same emotional responses circulating through the same group. Over time, the brain begins to treat these patterns as the normal emotional climate. And once something feels normal, behavior slowly adapts to it. In a consistently anxious environment, people may become more cautious with decisions. Ideas feel riskier. Small uncertainties trigger stronger reactions than they otherwise would. In a highly cynical environment, curiosity often fades. Suggestions are dismissed faster. Creative thinking quietly slows down because skepticism becomes the default emotional filter. None of these changes feel dramatic while they happen. They appear gradually, but over months or years, something subtle can emerge, a trajectory that hasn't moved very much. opportunities not pursued, conversations that never quite lead anywhere, decisions that repeatedly lean towards safety or conflict. The strange part is that individuals rarely attribute these patterns to the emotional atmosphere around them. Instead, they assume it reflects their personality, their judgment, or the nature of the world itself. But underneath those long-term shifts, the brain may still be responding to the same quiet process that began in seconds, the automatic simulation of other minds. And when scientists started studying that mechanism more closely, they found something remarkable. The brain appears to contain systems designed specifically for this kind of emotional mirroring. For a long time, scientists believed understanding other people required deliberate thought. You observe someone's behavior, you analyze it, then you infer what they might be feeling. But discoveries in neuroscience suggested something faster was happening. In the early 1990s, researchers studying primate brains found a group of cells that behaved in a surprising way. These neurons activated when the animal performed an action, like grasping an object, but they also activated when the animal watched another individual perform the same action. The brain was not just observing behavior, it was mirroring it internally. Later research suggested similar systems may exist in humans, often called mirror systems. When we see someone smile, areas related to smiling can activate in our own brain. When we watch someone in pain, parts of our own pain processing network can respond. This doesn't mean we literally feel the exact same experience, but the brain begins running a lightweight internal simulation, and emotional signals trigger similar responses. A stressed voice, a fearful expression, a relaxed posture. These cues activate prediction systems inside the brain. The mind tries to anticipate the other person's internal state, and part of that prediction process involves temporarily recreating pieces of it. In other words, emotional contagion isn't just social influence, it's a side effect of how the brain understands other minds. Simulation helps us empathize, coordinate, and respond quickly in groups. But it also means emotional signals travel through social environments far more easily than most people realize. Not because we choose to absorb them, because the brain is built to model other people from the inside. And once you see that mechanism clearly, something about everyday emotions starts to look different, because many of the feelings we treat as purely internal may actually be part of a larger system, one that quietly connects everyone in the room. If you look back at the beginning of this pattern, it starts with something simple. You walk into a room, and your mood shifts. At the time, it feels natural. Your brain interprets the change as a response to the situation. Maybe the room feels tense. Maybe the group feels optimistic. Maybe the conversation carries a quiet sense of worry. But what feels like a personal emotional reaction may actually be the result of many small signals arriving at once. Facial expressions, tone of voice, posture, micro-reactions between people. Your brain reads these signals continuously, running small simulations to understand what the people around you might be experiencing. And in doing so, it often reproduces fragments of those emotional states inside your own body. The result is subtle but powerful. Emotions move through groups almost the way currents move through water, quietly adjusting the direction of everyone nearby. Most of the time, this system helps humans function together. It allows empathy to emerge quickly. It helps groups coordinate without constant explanation, but it also means something slightly unsettling. What we call our emotional state is rarely built by the brain alone. It is built through constant interaction with other nervous systems, which means that many of the feelings that seem deeply personal may have started somewhere else in the room.